The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect the views of Money Radio staff, management, or advertisers, and do not represent an offer to buy or sell any securities. Some interviews heard on this program may be sponsored by the participants. It's time for Health Futures with Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth. This is Arizona's only show dedicated to providing you with expert advice on how to live a longer, healthier, and happier life. To learn more, call 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Bob Roth.
Good afternoon. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and it must be Friday. And indeed it is. We're smack dab in the middle of July 16th. We're coming at you live from the Scottsdale Air Park radio studios of Money Radio, 1510 AM, 105.3 FM, and the World Wide Web, moneyradio1510.com. And we are in the dog days of summer, but somehow it's 82 degrees out. We had a little bit of rain. We'll take it. We will take it for sure. So if this is your first time tuning into our show is about how our older adult population can live a healthier, happier life. And how do we do that? We do that by bringing extraordinary guests to the show. And I'm going to cut right to it and just introduce our guests, because our guests are what make the show. This is a first-time appearance by Jason Cobb. Jason has a company called Company Fiduciary Group. They provide fiduciary services. Jason Cobb, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
It is good. Man, you got a great radio voice. You really do. You got some good pipes there.
I blame my dad.
There you go. You probably do great karaoke.
You're probably right.
So you have a company that does fiduciary services. So,
Yes.
Help me understand and help our listeners understand what is a fiduciary and how can a fiduciary be a effective part of estate planning? Because planning is really what our show is about, especially with older adults. That adage, and I've used it before, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And it's so important to do planning.
You're spot on. Thank you again. A fiduciary is, I've tried and I've failed to come up with an elevator pitch as to what it is that I do. Generally speaking, a fiduciary is somebody who is in a position of trust and is essentially a surrogate decision maker, is entrusted to make a decision on behalf of somebody else. That's incredibly vague. It's incredibly general.
And incredibly important.
Really
important.
That's absolutely right. If you've ever purchased a house, your realtor has a fiduciary relationship with you. If you've purchased a car, you've executed that power of attorney for the dealer to speak with the MVD. They're a fiduciary for you. It's somebody that you're granting authority to make decisions for you. And when it comes to estate planning, a fiduciary like myself and the host of professional fiduciaries across Arizona, we are an entire profession dedicated to carrying out the wishes of individuals during their lives and after their lives. That's effectively what we do, and everything in between.
And it's interesting, do you get put into that role when there are family members? I know that you probably get put in that role when they're not, and when people are not able to make those decisions because of, whether it be a physical or emotional limitation or behavioral limitation.
Sure.
Their fiduciaries are appointed. But it goes both ways?
It really does. An individual can find themselves having a fiduciary involved in their matter, whether there's family involved or not. Oftentimes, the situation in which we are involved and there's family, it's because a family member has likely done a bad thing, or our client or the person in question is at risk of exploitation, unfortunately, at the hands of a family member. Alternatively, it can be that there's warring siblings or warring family members, and they just can't seem to get along, and so the court may intervene and just say, hey, neither of the parties are able to take care of mom and dad. We're going to appoint a third party.
Wow. And you've been doing this for a little while, haven't you?
Yeah. I'm getting my stripes here. I got a couple gray hairs that have sprouted. I've been in the industry since 2007.
Yes, and I'm going to ask you now, how did you get into this profession? I mean, I'm sure there's a story.
There is a story.
Because this business is not easy at all, especially when you know that emotions, just like you described with family members, are very heightened, and you may not be viewed as a very likable person by some of the family members, but you, as a fiduciary, and I think I understand this correctly, you are looking and acting on behalf of that person that needs somebody to be looking after them.
Yeah, you're right, and it's not my job to be liked. It's my job to take care of my people, and oftentimes, as much as I want to be liked, and I consider myself a relatively likable guy, this is an industry where it's relatively thankless sometimes because we're called in some pretty tough situations, and we really just have to take care of the business at hand, and sometimes that does result in us not making very many friends.
Yeah, I imagine that.
Yeah.
And I imagine you got some stories, and I'm going to ask you to share some of those
happily
at some point in time. But when I opened it up, I talked about how the fiduciary, how it can play a part in estate planning. And I'd like you to take us through that, because I think that's really important.
Sure, be happy to. The most important thing is for an individual to have a plan. And that's what this show is about. Have a plan when we're talking about what's going to happen with yourself or with the disposition of your assets and your accumulated wealth when you pass away. And we're considering who is going to be the person that's going to replace you in making those decisions. Sometimes we look at our family members, and we'll talk a little bit about why that may or may not be a good thing. But then there's this profession like ours that is a neutral third party that comes in, that's got the experience, the knowledge, the know-how of kind of navigating the court system and the laws, that can come in and get the job taken care of, because as we have found, and many of us can attest if we've done this for our parents, this can be a full-time job. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of work that goes into doing what we do. Maybe it's better that you actually rely on a professional to do it. So come up with a plan. And I would encourage that plan start with an attorney or an estate planning professional.
Right.
Talk about all of the things that you've got going on in your life. Talk about the wealth you've accumulated. Talk about what your plans are. Talk about what you want to have happen. Even if you're still here with us, who's going to be your voice for you when you can't express your needs yourself? Identify what that is, and that estate planning attorney, they'll walk you through, and they'll get you to the right place. Having a good plan is important. And then write it down. My thought is, you're going to an attorney, they're going to write it down, but so many things that we've done in so many cases that we've seen and come across our desk are just improper planning.
Right.
And it results in a lot of grief, a lot of heartache, a lot of money, and a lot of time that could otherwise have been avoided if we had just taken the proper steps and the time at the front end to do the right planning.
Memorializing your plans, making sure those wishes are understood by not only loved ones, but certainly third parties like yourself that are left to execute those plans.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And you plan for the best, you hope for the hope for the best, plan for the worst, excuse me.
That's right.
In those instances, even with the best set of plans, you still might end up with a fiduciary involved, just because, you're working with human dynamics, and you're working with a lot of those less desirable traits that kind of crop up in an individual when they're looking at money.
And lots of things happen too. You may have children, but children may become incapacitated themselves. They may move away. They may pass. So then who's left to figure out how to execute the individual's wishes?
Yeah.
So if that roadmap is down, it makes it really easy for firms like you to follow through.
It's a great start.
Yes, absolutely. You hear the music? We're down one segment. Hey, by the way, Suns basketball tomorrow night.
Yep.
What do you think?
We need it.
we do, but they're back home.
They're back home. They're back home.
They're back home.
But we need it. We need to see some performance here.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. Well, we've got Jason Cobb here in the studio. He's the principal fiduciary at Company Fiduciary Group. We're one down. We got 3 more to go. Stick around. We will be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, taking stock in you. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and here we are in our second segment. If you're just tuning in, I have got Jason Cobb, the principal fiduciary from Company Fiduciary Group, and we are talking about putting a plan together and how important that is. If you missed that first segment, go up to our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button, third button down is radio show. I'm also going to give Jason a shameless plug here. If you want to reach out to him or Compass, you can call him at 602-595-1811 or go to Compass, COMPASSFID group.com. So, Jason, we got a chance to really talk about why it's important to have an estate plan.
Yeah.
And, I would love, because our listeners, they love stories and they like to visualize stories. And I know you have plenty of them. You've been doing this since 2007. Love for you to share with our listeners, a situation where there was a plan, where there wasn't a plan, and, what those outcomes were. Certainly, I hope they were somewhat positive because you got involved, but I would love for you to share with our listeners and the importance of having a plan.
Absolutely. So a good example of a story where there wasn't a plan in place and we were able to turn it around. Early on in our infancy of the company, we inherited a case from the Veterans Administration. We were payee for an individual. And so it was our responsibility to simply just write checks. We wrote checks to pay his bills, and then we would send him a check for ancillary and personal allowance expenses. And as our administration went on a few years, I get a call from a hospice social worker, and she says, "Hey, we really are in a dire situation here. Our client's not doing so well. Can you help out with an estate plan?" And so I said, "Well, I'm not an attorney. No, I can't, but I can get him involved with somebody." And she said, "We're really running out of time. Is there anything that you can do?" So I went over and I told her that I'd head over and see what I can do. This gentleman was nonverbal. He had a diagnosis of throat cancer. And so throughout the entirety of my administration, I'd never once spoken with this man. I get to his house, and he lived a relatively Spartan lifestyle, TV in one corner, a bike in the other, and sit down on the couch. Social worker excuses herself, and I'm thinking, all right, how the heck am I going to figure out how to help this guy? Mm-hmm. And so I start asking him some leading questions and some yes or no questions, and we're making some headway. Somewhere throughout this process, the communication changed, and it became so heavily pronounced with the nonverbal communication and the eye contact, and I ended up having what was likely one of the most profound interactions with another individual that I've ever had, because it was so intimate, if you will, and it required active listening, and it required just really getting down to it. I learned about this man's life. I learned about his kids. I learned about all of the shortcomings that he felt he had as a father, and we started talking about what he wanted to do with his estate. We get all that stuff taken care of. As I'm about to leave, he stands me up, and we walk into the kitchen. On the calendar, hanging on the refrigerator, is the 19th, and the 19th is circled. And so I'm looking at it, and all of a sudden this profound kind of sense of understanding washed over me, and I turned and I asked him, I said, is that the date that the doctors gave you? Is this when you're supposed to die? And he looked at me square in the eye, a little bit of sadness, a little bit of resignation, and said, yeah, and he shook his head yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And I
got chills.
Yeah.
I could see it.
It was amazing.
It's coming back to you too.
It was incredible, and it was so profound. And I'll tell you, they were right. I kid you not, on that day it happened. And what we were able to do is get the right people involved, and he was taken care of. The disposition of his minor estate was taken care of because he'd been squirreling money away, by the way. So he actually had a substantial amount to pass on. And we were able to get the professionals involved to help get this plan taken care of. And so his last 2 weeks on this earth weren't filled with concern about what's going to happen to my stuff and what's going to happen to me. It was an amazing moment.
He got that all taken care of.
He got it taken care of.
And I will tell you, hats off to that hospose person.
Yep.
To reach out to you to get that done.
Absolutely. And I don't recommend to anybody wait that long.
Yes.
but fortunately, with the right group of individuals and teammates involved, we got it taken care of.
And I would imagine that, on the converse side, where there aren't plans like this in place, that's when you come in and you're just like, damn, I wish you guys had just taken some time and really put a game plan together. Anything you want to share, because I'm sure you see more of that than you do the other and helping somebody through.
Yeah. Well, in those instances in which there is a plan and it doesn't quite work out, there was a situation. It was a successful situation. I think we were called in again earlier on in our company's history, and we were requested by the court to act as a successor guardian and conservator. So we were responsible for our client's health and medical well-being, as well as her finances and her assets. We took over the responsibility from her daughter. And so we've got kind of the classic situation where we've got a group of 4 kids. There's 2 on one side, 2 on the other. So they're bifurcated and they're fighting. They're in court like we talked about earlier. Judge says, you know what, current guardian, you're not doing so well. Other beneficiaries, we're not going to have you involved either. Let's get Company Fiduciary Group in. So they did. And going through, this woman was amazing. She was a spitfire. She had an opinion and she shared it. And as I'm going through this administration and interacting with her, I'm learning that she's kind of with it. Why are we looking at a guardianship here? What's really going on?
Right.
And her estate plan was well laid out. She had a trustee. She had nominations for her for the guardianship that had already blown up. Long and the short, I said, you know what, let's get her in front of a doctor. I want to have her evaluated again and see what's really happening here. She goes in front of a neuropsychologist, has an exam, and if you can believe it, the diagnosis that came back, she was sad. She was sad because her husband of 50 years had just died. And you know what? She just didn't feel like doing life for a little bit. And in that moment, the kids swooped in. They moved into the house, started renovating, started making changes. And all of this was just simply because there wasn't the right individual there, or maybe there was the wrong individual there.
Or maybe they didn't just ask.
Maybe
they should have just asked her and just said, "Hey, Mom, what do you want?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that easy. I mean, you have to listen.
Yeah. Yeah. The take away somebody's voice, and so many catastrophic things can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've been doing this since 2007.
Yes, sir.
So what got you into this field? As we wind down the first half, look, if I recall, I mean, you spent a lot of your life here in Arizona.
That's right. Yeah.
And you could have done just about anything.
Well, I was supposed to do something completely different. I don't know that there's any one of us out there that says, I want to be a fiduciary when I grow up. Nobody knows what that is. It truly fell. The opportunity fell into my lap. I graduated from ASU with a good friend of mine. We were both kinesiology majors, and his family owned a fiduciary company, and I was working at Bank of America at the time, and I was looking for a little bit of a change. Bank of America wasn't willing to provide it to me, so this company said, hey, we got a position. I was occupational therapy bound, so I was working with children with Down syndrome and autism, and I was really just in love with this population, and there was this profession that existed where you can take care of an individual, and you can look after their assets, and it's called a fiduciary. And I fell in love with it, and so was responsible for case management for a number of special needs trusts and changed my life.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it says a lot about you. I mean, especially, cutting your teeth, working with, the special needs and autistic kids, special needs trusts are something that they're needed for that population for sure.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, just incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah. When we come back in the second half, there's a lot more I want to talk to you about. I'd love to talk to you about too. What do you see the future, not just of fiduciaries, but how do we take this really awful event that just happened over the last 16 months and really learn from that?
Yeah.
And how can we do a better job of communicating to family members what our wishes are, what our plans are, and really avoid having the opportunity to have a court appoint somebody like yourself to intervene when the family could have worked it out themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know what, Jason, I really appreciate having you on. This gives great perspective, not just to me, but it gives great perspective to our listeners, really understanding about fiduciaries and your role and certainly the role of planning in that whole spectrum, because it's that old adage, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail. And, you need to make sure your wishes are known. And if there's any time, there's better time. There's the time should be now. And I have always said it's not a one-time visit. It's a evolutionary thing. It's a discussion that you have with your loved ones, and you plan on having these discussions over and over again.
You're right. And don't be afraid to have those uncomfortable conversations, because that's what this can be sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, look, they say there are two things guaranteed in life, right?
That's
Death
right.
and taxes. So, I mean, we all are going to get there, but we should make sure our wishes are known.
Hear, hear.
You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. I've got Jason Cobb from Compass Fiduciary here in the studio. We're halftime here at Health Futures. We got 2 more segments up. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Being in control of your money provides freedom. Learn how to make it, spend it, and invest it. We're Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and if you're just tuning in, we're in our 3rd segment here, and I am pleased to have Jason Cobb. He's the principal fiduciary at Compass Fiduciary Group. They provide fiduciary services, and if you missed the first 2 segments, they were excellent. You can catch them up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button. 3rd button down is radio show. You'll catch this show, and you'll catch about 400 others we've been bringing to you for the last 8 years. I can't believe it's 8 years.
That's great, man.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it is crazy that we're in the back half of 2021, Jason.
Already.
It's
I am not ready.
I know, I'm not. July 16th, really.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. It's been a crazy couple years with this pandemic. And, I think the pandemic itself should be giving people pause to really say, you know what? This is a good time for me to get my affairs in order. Yeah. And I know a lot of people that are doing a lot of remodeling their house. They're, getting rid of stuff. This is the time for you to take inventory of your personal assets, your wishes, your wills, all the things that go along with that.
Yeah, well stated. We're looking kind of outside ourselves to make some of those remodels and renovations, and the same thing is true with your estate plan if you've already got one. I mean, certainly recommend that you revisit it. And if it's been some time, you might want to schedule that appointment with your attorney. Laws change, feelings and thoughts and decisions change. I think it's incredibly important to take stock in that and make sure, as we've seen this whole past year, the one thing that was evident is that anything can happen. And the whole idea here is let's be prepared, and preparedness begins with action. And so doing that is just such a great idea, because it helps you just memorialize what it is that you want to have happen, what it is that you want to see happen. Another really important point is, sometimes it just brings the family together and you can have these conversations. So much of what I deal with hinges on misunderstandings or a lack of the appropriate type of communication, that if it had happened appropriately at the front end, we'd be avoiding so many of these issues.
So true. So true. You talked about feelings. And, I really would like to get a vibe from you because you deal with a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
And you have to be rock steady and you can't show any emotions. That's got to be really hard. And I mean, you have to have feelings and you have to really care. Obviously, you advocate for the clients that you're serving, but you certainly have. I'm sure there's situations where you empathize with the other family members, but you can't really show that. That's got to be hard.
Yeah, the measure of impartiality really does eliminate some of that ability to be emotional. And of course, we want to be as clear-headed as possible when we're making these decisions. There are things that are very difficult in what we do, families and personalities can be very strong. It really is about just taking a step back and understanding as a professional, we've got a job to do. But also, I've done this countless number of times. I've seen this similar situation a number of times, but the person across the table, this is the first time it's happening to them. And the measure of empathy there is so incredibly important. Because I tell people this if you just take time to listen to what a person has to say, it'll calm them down. You'll have a full understanding of what's going on, and I'll know how better to do my job.
Right. It's listening and it's just communicating.
Yeah.
And I think too many emotions get just too heated and too, amped up, and they can't seem to see the forest through the tree.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. And the especially amongst siblings, the sibling rivalry or the sibling issues that were born when they were young carry on later on into life. And I've seen these situations where, Sally stole Timmy's piggy bank when he was 8 years old. So now Sally's always been a thief. And these are the things that I hear from my clients. And a lot of times you're just really not going to get away from the interpersonal relationships that happen naturally amongst siblings. And so when you're considering, all right, who's going to be responsible for my estate plan, you really got to ask and answer, should it be my kids?
So true. I remember, look, you and I have been doing this a long time, and I remember a case where I wasn't involved directly, but my care service coordinator was, and the adult child said about her mother, said, you know what, she was really mean to me growing up, and I'm just giving a dose of her medicine right back. And I'm just like, really?
Yeah.
It's just so vengeful, and it just is so wrong on so many different fronts.
Yeah, it is. It is, and it's unfortunate, and that sounds like, again, a situation that may have been obviated if you had the proper planning.
It would have been, and maybe Jason Cobb would have been in there looking out for her, that's for sure. So fiduciaries, you are the third-party intermediary really helping out with guardianship and conservatorship.
That's right.
For the person that needs somebody to look out for them.
Right.
So, to our listeners, how does one select a fiduciary? Because there are many of them out there, and there are some many good ones, and probably like in the home care business, there's some bad actors too.
Certainly.
So how do you select one?
Well, if you've gone down the process where you've started with your plan and you're speaking with an estate planning attorney, ask that attorney for some referrals. Your attorney is already a trusted resource from you, so start there. Anybody that they provide to you as a potential candidate for the fiduciary services has already got their stamp of approval on it. And then give a call, pick up the phone, and have a conversation. As much as we'd like the convenience of sending emails back and forth, it's so incredibly important to have an actual conversation and a face-to-face, if you can, with as many of these fiduciary referrals as possible. I am fortunate to be in an amazing field, and there are so many awesome people that do what I do. And we're all talented and we've got the ability to do the job. But how we approach life and how we approach different situations changes. We're all individuals. And so I would say follow your gut. Anytime that there's a situation that requires a huge decision, which this is, you're entrusting somebody with the entirety of your life and your assets and your health and your well-being. Spend some time speaking with that person and then follow your gut. If they're telling you no, don't go with them.
So attorneys cannot really serve in that role. They can serve as trustee, right, to an estate, but maybe they can't do that either.
Well, no. So attorneys can serve in a fiduciary capacity and often do. But it's do you want to pay $450 an hour or do you want to pay $135?
Got it.
And that's really the biggest selling point. Attorneys are great; they know what they're doing, but they'll charge you a lot for it.
$450 seems to be on the low side these days. Those were the 2007 rates, Jason.
This is the probate attorneys. We're a different brand.
No, I totally get that. It's hard to believe we're now down 3 segments. We're going to have music come back on. But, I want to really go back and talk about this past year and this pandemic and really how it should be a wake-up call for everybody to really, what I was saying when we began this segment, really cleaning up your house, redecorating, repainting, making your house your home. You need to do that with your affairs. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. Got a little Marshall Tucker band taking us out in the third segment.
Not bad.
You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. I've got Jason Cobb here in the studio. He's with Company Fiduciary Group, and we are talking about why you should plan so that you don't really need to have his work and his services. But if you do, he's talking about why his services should be ones that you should select. Stick around. Down 3 segments. We got one more to go. We'll be right back.
Now back to Health Futures, taking stock in you. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call 602-264-8009. Now, here's your host, Cypress Home Care Solutions, Bob Roth.
Welcome back. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth, and if you're just tuning in, we're in our 4th segment here. I got Jason Cobb here in the studio. He's got a company called Company Fiduciary Group. If you are interested in learning more about his organization and the work that he does, go out to compassfidgroup.com or call his office at 602-595-1811. If you missed the first 3 segments, you can catch them up on our website at cypresshomecare.com. Click on the media button. 3rd button down is radio show. So we have talked a lot about a fiduciary, and we talked a lot about why you need a plan. I teed this up on the 3rd segment, talking about the fact that we just got through 16, 17 months of this pandemic. A lot of people have put their affairs in order in terms of households. I can tell you at my house, at the Roth house, Susie and I, did a lot more work in our backyard. We kind of made it more of our vacation spot because we weren't going anywhere, right? So we did a lot of purging and cleaning up in our homes. But, really want to talk to you about, this is a good time for families to take a look at their estate plans and review them right now.
That's right. That's right. Having that conversation with the family is a great place to start. It's not a comfortable conversation. And I think that if I could impart anything, it would be, have some bravery to ask and answer some of those really difficult questions. And those questions would include, what is it that I want to have happen with my wealth when I pass away? If I'm still here, but maybe I don't have the capacity to make my decisions, who's going to make those decisions, and what are those decisions? What do I want to have happen?
Exactly. What do I want? Where do I want to live?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the more difficult questions is, who's going to do the work? We talked a little bit today about the time that it takes to settle an individual's estate. I think many of us understand and know the time that it takes to care for a loved one. We all each have our own lives, and we all have our own professions. And I have a number of clients that have come through my doors that have included Compass Fiduciary Group as part of their estate plan. And they've said, my kids are great. I absolutely love them. They're all fully competent. They're able to do this job. I just don't want to put that on them. I don't want to have one of my children be responsible for making distributions to the other ones.
Right.
I don't want to ruin that relationship.
So important.
It is important, and there's nothing wrong with taking that position. There really isn't, and I'm not trying to talk myself into a job here.
No,
but it is an honest conversation that needs to happen, because I will tell you, if we put a child or another family member in that role, but they're not equipped to do it, you're likely going to end up with a fiduciary anyway.
It's interesting because I equate that to my wife Susan and I 19 years ago buying our first long-term care insurance policy. And then we bought another one 10 years later, just so we had enough there so our children wouldn't be there to care for us. We don't want to put that on them.
Yeah.
And just to your point, you don't want to put this responsibility on your kids.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you think it's going to cause conflict.
Right.
And you and I both know the root of a lot of the conflicts is the sibling rivalries, the siblings fighting over one another.
It is, and I commend the families, and it's not an easy situation. We talked about feelings earlier, and there are so many emotions that are happening, and we're asking our children or our family members to feel the feelings, then put them away, and then perform and do a job. And sometimes that's just a lot to ask of somebody. There are a host of families that are able to make it work, and I commend them for that. I really do. But in those instances where you ask and answer that difficult question, and it comes up that maybe my child isn't the best person, you might want to consider a fiduciary.
Well, exactly. So as we wind down, are there questions I haven't asked? Lasting thoughts you want to leave people? You want to talk about sons? Or you want to talk about adult beverages? Because both of us enjoy really a good scotch or bourbon.
I don't know if we've got enough time to talk about that. You do. You're absolutely correct. We both do enjoy a good scotch, a good bourbon. Sometimes you need it after a long day in the fiduciary industry.
One bourbon, one scotch,
yeah.
one beer, right? Church Thurgood.
Exactly.
We should have Josh play that as we close.
I really just want to drive home the point that planning and preparedness is so integral in what it is that we do with our lives. You've worked so hard. You've worked an entire lifetime to amass the wealth, and you want to create this generational gift to your family. Sometimes you can muddy that gift by putting the wrong people involved. And heck, if you just want to throw some ideas out there and get an idea and some perspective, I'm open. Have some, feel free to give me a call. I'll have the conversation with you, and we'll talk about what you're looking at. Because we don't have a tendency to really see what the potential is unless we're faced with a situation. And I love having conversations with people about their specific situations and giving them food for thought.
Well, you know what? We live in this village, and I will tell you the great thing about this village that we live in is that there are all kinds of resources. And, sometimes I get asked about fiduciaries just like you do get asked about home care.
That's right.
And you have your little village that you can be able to provide resources to the clients that you serve, or even people that may have some questions, about, whether it be care services, whether it be about, finances, whether it be, lawyer type questions. I mean, you're able to direct them to those resources.
You're right. I am more than happy to be a source of information, and so much of what I strive to do in our industry is to educate the public. People don't necessarily know what it is that we do, and this is a scary situation sometimes. And so, if there's anything that I can do to alleviate any of that fear, provide individuals with contacts, with information, I'm happy to do it. It really does strengthen the community. It helps out an individual. And that's what we're here for. We're here to take care of each other. There's no doubt about it. I'm happy to do that.
So, any big plans for the weekend?
Big plans for the weekend. Yeah, there's
Suns basketball tomorrow night.
Suns basketball.
6:00. Tune in.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe an adult beverage or two. Certainly playing around with the pool chemistry and spending some time with the kids.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you?
Pretty much the same. I think I need to do some purging more. And I'm talking about, I know my wife Susie might be listening. I did promise that I make a little bit more room in my closet and get rid of some of the stuff that has been accumulating over the years.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And there's no shortage of work to be done. And I'll play with my 2 labs. I got 2 Labrador retrievers. I got a 10-and-a-half-year-old and a 1-year-old.
Oh, that's great.
They keep me very, very busy. They really do.
That is amazing. And so we've got a 9-month-old Wisla.
And what's the 9 months?
Her
Visa.
name.
What's her name?
Her name's Tara.
Tara.
And
is she a terror?
Short, yeah, short for terrorist or pterodactyl or any one of those. She's all over the place.
Well, that's the thing I always say to my dogs, and my kids or my wife or whoever's listening. When they want to be fed and they start acting up, I'm like, I do not succumb to terrorism. You're not going to get your way.
That's right.
You can whine all you want, but you are going to have to wait.
That's right. We do not negotiate with terrorists. I hear you.
Well, listen, Jason, it's been great having you on, and I want to go ahead and give another plug for you. CompassFIDgroup.com, and it's 602-595-1811. And I will say this, you definitely have the pipes for radio. No, you really do.
I got the face for it, too.
Well, that's my line. You're listening to Health Futures, Taking Stock in You. I'm your host, Bob Roth. We'll be back next Friday. Always good to see my friend Jason, and we'll have to have some more adult beverages. I think the next time we're together, we're going to go down the bourbon route.
I cannot wait.
Well, listen, you take care. Have fun in the pool this weekend, and don't let Tara become a terrorist.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it.
All right, make it a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll be back next Friday.
There's no place like home. You've been listening to Bob Roth's Health Futures. If you have questions about your own or your loved one's future health care, call Cypress Home Care Solutions at 602-264-8009. That's 602-264-8009. Or visit cypresshomecare.com. Be sure to join Health Futures with Bob Roth every Friday at noon, right here on Money Radio 1510 and 105.3 FM.